Broadcasting live from the Business Radio X studios in Phoenix, Arizona, it's time for Phoenix Business Radio, spotlighting the city's best businesses and the people who lead them.
Hello and welcome to Phoenix Business Radio, broadcasting live from the Max 6 Entrepreneurial Center right here in Tempe, Arizona, where we help build businesses and connect you with the right people. I'm Karen Nowicki, and I am looking forward to our conversation today. We have two phenomenal guests in our studio, David Martinez III, Director and Strategic Community Partnerships with Vitalyst Health Foundation. Welcome, David.
Thank you, Karen.
Happy to have you. And Paula Cullison, President and Founder with Arizona Women's Partnership Incorporated. Welcome to the studio.
Thank you so much, Karen.
Thrilled to have you. So we love to get started just by getting to know both of you and your organizations. We have plenty of time to have this conversation. So if you would please, I'm going to ask Paula to start for us. Tell us who you are, about your organization, and then how did you land there?
Okay. Thank you very much for this opportunity, Karen. I'm really excited about speaking to your audience. About 2002, I started the Arizona Women's Partnership as an all-volunteer philanthropic nonprofit to focus on awarding grants to small charities that help women and children and families throughout the state of Arizona. In doing so, I had originally the intention of raising $100,000 and calling it quits. However, I just got the ball rolling, and to date, we have awarded over $600,000 to over 90 charities throughout the state of Arizona, and they in turn serve about 250,000 people annually. And it's a very diverse population. We're very conscientious about that. We are reaching out to disadvantaged families, women, children, and also the refugee population and the immigrant population. So we're really happy about that. So my husband said to me, well, Paula, how are you going to raise all this money? And so I thought about it. And because was involved at the time with the culinary industry, although I love to eat and drink wine, I'm not a chef or a real professional cook. I thought, well, why don't I reach out to a number of the head chefs at the major resorts and hotels. And I said, where are the women in your kitchen? Because I don't see them. They must be invisible to the community. And they said, well, they're pastry chefs. And I said, well, I'm going to go home and think about this. I'm going to create an event. And that was our first fundraiser. It was a play on words, Getting Our Just Desserts. And because I had so many female chefs come to the table and so many on hold waiting to get in, I said to my husband, I said, Tim, I have to create another event. So I said, well, let's think about this. I like jazz music. I like wine. Why don't we call it Wine, Women, and Jazz? And we'll invite women who own small restaurants, do catering, or are sous chefs to the table. And so we had two concurrent events, Getting Our Just Desserts with 24 female pastry chefs, plus the wine distributors. And then we had Wine, Women, and Jazz at, that one was at the Ritz-Carlton. The other one was at the Orange Tree Golf Resort. And they were so generous to us because the chefs were bringing the food. The wine distributors were bringing the wine. We didn't have to pay a fee to the hotels. They were very, very generous. And so that's how we got the ball rolling. And so we had a website. On the website, we posted our grant application. We were looking for small charities that have an operating budget of $450,000. They couldn't be religious or political. And they could be anywhere in the state, and they had to help women and or children or refugees in the state of Arizona. So that's how I started it. And one thing kind of led to the next, Karen, and it was amazing to me because I obviously needed help because it takes a village to do all this, right? So I would post my quote unquote job offerings on volunteermatch.org. And I had several colleges call me about their internship program. And so I had interns from ASU, Phoenix College, the Art Institute, and then I also had a number of virtual volunteers, especially during the COVID period. So it was constant. I mean, then I would get more volunteers than I needed, so I would create more jobs because I thought I don't want to turn them away. If they're willing to give their time and their talent to me, I'm not to me personally, but to the cause, then I'll find a way to make it happen for them. So,
My goodness. Can you follow that act?
yes, he can.
I was going to
Yes,
say,
he
I wish I had
can.
met you earlier because I too like wine and food and jazz.
Tell us about yourself, your role, and then, of course, the organization, David.
Yeah, I echo Paula's gratitude in having us here, Karen. My name is David Martinez. I'm a director at Vitalyst Health Foundation. And in my role at Vitalyst, I have the great pleasure of meeting and working with very passionate, inspired people like Paula and a lot of the grant partners that they've been able to support over the years and leverage Vitalyst resources for them. So in my role at Vitalyst, I direct our grants program as well as our portfolio area that we call civic health. So how communities are coming together to improve the health of their neighbors and their communities and by extension our great states here in Arizona. So for folks that aren't familiar with Vitalyst Health Foundation, they might be familiar with the St. Luke's hospital systems here in Tempe and downtown Phoenix. Those used to be nonprofit hospitals, and in the mid-90s, they sold to a for-profit company, and the endowments or the foundations of those hospitals separated out and formed what was then called St. Luke's Charitable Health Trust, then St. Luke's Health Initiative, and now Vitalyst Health Foundation, which is a play on words as well.
Yeah.
So we support the fidelity of our great states and want to support catalytic thinking that is improving the health. So with the evolution of our brand to Vitalyst Health Foundation, so has our thinking evolved with seeing health as more than just health care. So we recognize that while healthcare is very important to living a healthy life, there's so many more factors. The social determinants of health is often what we refer to it, or the structural determinants of health. Those elements of a healthy community, like being able to afford your house, have access to healthy local foods, a whole host of things. So our portfolio is pretty broad,
Yeah.
but we do focus primarily on housing, healthcare integration, that integration between the physical, mental, and social determinants of health. And then, as I mentioned, the portfolio area that I oversee called civic health. So we in my role again, I get to meet folks like Paula and her great grant partners to leverage the resources that we have at Vitalyst for the state.
How did you two originally connect through this work, and how long has it been approximately for the two of you as leaders?
I think I met David at one of the St. Luke's parties.
Oh, perfect.
If people invite me to a party, I usually show up.
Again,
You
there's a
would-
theme here: food, wine.
Yes, yeah, we
Stuffing,
love that.
which was before we went live, but stuffing, right? We need to have a food, wine, and highlight stuffing. So,
And so David and I talked about, obviously what his role was with Vitalyst, and maybe at that time it was actually St. Luke's. Once upon a time, a while ago, for 5 years, I was a consultant to the TAP program, which David oversees, this technical assistance program for small nonprofits, whether you're helping them develop a board of directors, do fundraising, marketing, develop an event, that kind of tell their story. So the TAP program is an invaluable treasure for the nonprofit community. So I take my hat off to David again for facilitating that and continuing it.
Yeah, I certainly stand on the shoulders of giants that help build up that program at Vitalyst Health Foundation. I can get really cheeky and nerdy and have kind of honed in on this utilization of acronyms and alliteration. So part of our capacity building program at Vitalyst is to leverage technical assistance partnerships, or TAP, because sometimes nonprofits just need a little tap.
No
a
doubt
little-
about it. They get tapped out pretty easily because, they're the ones that we're dealing with the Arizona Women's Partnership, and I'll give you an idea of some of them, are operating on shoestring budgets. As I mentioned, their operating budget has to be under 450,000. Most of them are under 125,000. And so they really are doing the most that they possibly can and filling the voids that exist in our society. So we focused on domestic violence, child abuse, CSL programs, as I mentioned, refugee families, welfare to work of making those women have a transition period. We also focus on the extracurricular activities that most of these families can't afford. So a number of them deal with providing musical instruments and instruction for children here in the Valley and on the Navajo and Hopi reservations. So we're really all over the state. As you can well imagine, Karen, David and I work with nonprofits that deal with crisis counseling. There's so much of a problem in our society because of a variety of factors, you know. So we work closely together too. And his source is very helpful to our grant recipients because every 2 weeks, right, David?
Mhm.
Every 2 weeks, David sends out a list of potential grantors, and
Oh.
we post it on our website so that if small nonprofits are looking for resources, they can go to his website or they can go to mine, and then they can also get on the distribution list so they can know when the deadlines are and not to wait until the last minute to ask for money. That's always a problem
Right.
because you're basically going to leave something out of the application and it's not going to be accepted, right?
Yeah. Yeah, 5 years ago when I started at Vitalyst, I worked to rebuild our capacity building program and then eventually began to direct our grants program. And we had all these great resources that were streamlined, coordinated. I just needed to get them out, get the word out about them. So thought, well, let me start an email distribution list. And again, with the cheekiness, I called it the Tap Tips email that goes out on Tuesdays.
Of course. It all makes sense.
Exactly. Initially, it was just to promote Vitalyst resources. We had, again, rebuilt our capacity building and grants program. So we had a lot of resources to share. We have an open door policy. That's how we initially met. And we discover partnerships with groups that reach out to us. So we definitely encourage partners or prospective partners to visit our website at vitalysthealth.org to discover partnership, whether it be our programmatic work in housing, healthcare integration, or civic health, or to explore the grant making partnership opportunities we have. But our grant cycles are, while we have an open door policy and we can discover partnerships throughout the year, we do have certain grant cycles to engage our board for approvals of those grants. So I wanted to share more grant opportunities. So our list began to grow in the email distribution list, and it's become one of our most popular newsletters. And thankfully, we have great collaborative partners like LISC Phoenix that promotes grant opportunities as well, like the local First Arizona Economic Recovery Center,
That's right.
our neighbors here at the studio that also promote grant opportunities and then connect these very hardworking nonprofit professionals with grant coaching, grant writing, free resources so that they can be successful in their grant applications and be able to support their great work.
And it's been wonderful for not only for us, but also for our grant applicants and their, the recipients. I just want to share with you, Karen, and your audience, a number that we gave to this year. It's hard for me to say no, and not in our committee. We have a very conscientious committee. We look very closely, especially at the bottom line of these nonprofits who are applying for our grants, because we've been entrusted with donations, and we want to make sure that they're used correctly. Most of our grant recipients, I would say, of the 90, probably 75% are multi-year grant recipients. They can apply as long as they still are within our guidelines. For example, this year we awarded $33,500. About Care for the Elderly provides services to the elderly in the East Valley. Alice's Place is in Winslow, Arizona, and they provide counseling and shelter for victims of domestic violence. There's a nice one in Tucson that we like. It's called the Angel Heart Pajama Project because if people leave on a domestic violence situation, they have the clothes on their back and the children don't have the pajamas. So it's pajamas and books for abused and neglected children. And then the Arizonans for the Protection of Exploited Children and Adults. These are girls who have been sexually abused, and they're housed in the Northwest Valley. I won't tell you where, but they are provided instruction, and so they can get their GEDs and then become gainfully employed. Arizona Reach is a program on the west side, Avondale, and it's basically food insecurity for teenagers. People forget about these young people, they're growing and they really need nourishment. So, Arizona Reach is a new one for us, 2 years in the making. Ballet Folklorico, I mentioned to you, Quetzali, they provide opportunities for Hispanic youth in the Mesa area. Books for classrooms. They provide books for the Tohono O'odham Nation in southern Arizona. I mean, the list goes on. Care for the caregivers, for disabled children. And that's a very stressful environment to be in. Control Alt Delete provides services for women and children fleeing domestic violence in the Mesa area. Originally, they asked for money for bus tickets. Now they need cards for gasoline because they have cars. Desert Sounds Performing Arts, been with us for a long time. Musical instruments and instruction for low-income youth, mostly in Mesa. Dignity House, these are women who were prostitutes who are now seeking shelter. They were trafficked and they're in Metro Phoenix. They're being taken care of. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. Esperanza Dance Project. Again, dance and music is a wonderful way in terms of looking at holistic health to transcend this catastrophic experience, traumatic experience that you had as a young person. The Grand Canyon Music Festival has a special component for Native American composers. They're with us for a couple of years now. They're mostly Navajo, Hopi, and Salt River Pima youth composing music.
Beautiful.
And they send us their CD every year when they apply for more money, and we're just like blown away. They have professional musicians playing their music, but they've composed it. And Yo-Yo Ma went up this last year.
Wow.
Amazing. He's an internationally known
Yes.
cellist.
Sure.
Helping at-risk teens also on the West Valley. And again, this one is one that's totally volunteer. They provide food for teenagers in those high schools that are in the West Valley. Neighbors Who Care, providing services for the elderly poor. The highest percentage of elderly poor, I think, in the United States, certainly in Arizona, are women, over 85%. So we know that that's going to be money well spent. Phoenix Legal Action Network, pro bono legal assistance to immigrant families. You know, this is another one where legal fees are so expensive that most families can't afford that. The Rising Youth Theater. This was a new one for us this year. It's a multi-generational artistic program focused on Title I schools. Most of these children in the Title I schools don't have exposure to the arts. And as you well know, in Arizona, the funding for arts education has been cut way, way back. And that's an integral part, you know, in terms of critical thinking skills, creative thinking skills, we need to do that. The Somali American United Council of Arizona, they're an umbrella organization like the Arizona Alliance of Nonprofits for 15 refugee groups in the Phoenix metro area. You know, when you incorporate your name, you can't change it. So I asked them about that. I said, if it says Somali American, that everybody's going to think they're all Somalis, and they're not. They're from, as I mentioned, about 15 different refugee groups. The Sounds Academy was new for us this year. Is also a music program for underserved youth, and that's valley-wide. Sounds of Autism is basically supportive services for populations dealing with autism. You know, I think the ability to detect and define autism is growing with the amount of research that's being done. Village of the Valley is a supportive pathway for programs for women who have survived abuse. You know, it's one thing to get them out of the environment, but it's really important to do the counseling that they need. And then, yes, for Navajo youth, they've been with us for about 15 years. The fellow who started it was a high school teacher on the reservation, and he wanted to make sure that the children had the right path in life, that they didn't get sidetracked into drugs and alcohol. And so they got them running marathons, half marathons, biking across the reservation, cleaning up the trails. It's wonderful. The other one I want to mention, and then I'll turn this over to David, was one that's no longer within our. There are a number who have grown out of our guidelines. Is Welcome to America.
Hmm.
Now, the gal who started, his brother-in-law was killed in the 9/11 attack, and she didn't want refugees to feel unwelcome because of what had happened. So she created Welcome to America, and she received the CNN Hero Award for it. Yeah.
How about
And
that?
so they provide household items books and clothing now to the refugee families that come here. Another one that is no longer part of our family, if you will. They became a multi-million-dollar nonprofit is Gabriel's Angels. And it's, putting children and dogs together. What could be better? The dogs have to be trained so that they are passive, and the children love petting them, washing them, hugging them, kissing them. And it's developing a sense of trust after you've been abused, because they take the dogs to the crisis center and also to the shelters.
Yes,
So
very familiar with a good portion of those. I'm pretty proud of myself for the 6 years that I've owned Phoenix Business Radio X.
yeah,
We've had a lot of those folks on there,
wonderful,
executive
Great.
directors,
wonderful.
donors, corporate partnerships. So I'm really thrilled to have you here today. And I feel like it's important to give Elena Thornton a shout out
Oh yes,
because
definitely.
she's the one who introduced us and said you must have Paula on. And Paula was smart enough to bring David. So
Yes,
shout out to our friend Elena and her advocacy and love for the arts, of course. In fact, Blue Guitar Magazine, are you familiar with them?
yes, of course.
I'm a featured poet in their edition this month. They just came out yesterday, and we were talking about poetry when she and her husband were on a segment with me, and she's like, "Karen, you've got to submit your poetry." So I did,
There you go.
Wonderful,
and I'm published now.
wonderful.
Incredible.
And Unity, this is totally a little bird walk, but Unity organization also has a daily word publication. And so a second poem at another friend's prompting will be published. So it's really neat to hear how we can support each other, right? Clearly, this collaborative effort.
Yeah.
That's really one of my favorite things about the greater Phoenix
Mhm.
business community. And that includes, of course, nonprofit, higher ed. So thank you, Paula, for
You're
those great
welcome.
shout outs for those people that you represent. I'm curious, David, in your world and what you're doing with your group, are there any other partnerships or the structure of partnerships that you would like to highlight right now?
Yeah, that is such an impressive list, Paula, and I'm always surprised when I hear your partnerships because they just represent just incredible people that are doing the most with the least,
Yes.
and throughout the state. You have
Yes.
great tribal representation there, great rural representation. I'm originally from rural southern Arizona, so I always appreciate an opportunity to move resources to rural communities because they are so under resourced. But as your list is testament to, there are great things happening throughout the state, but certainly in rural and tribal communities. So while Vitalyst is based in Phoenix, we have partnerships throughout the state. Our grant making partnership opportunities are a little bit different than some funders. We focused on an upstream public health approach to improving health. Really means that we try to support efforts that tackle the root causes of issues that are barriers to improving the health of people and our communities. That change often includes some sort of policy or practice change or a greater systemic or environmental change. So our grants program, our largest grants program is simply called System Change Grants because we want to change the
Mhm.
system that is putting up barriers for people in Arizona to live a healthy life. So we have a systems change grant program that also includes what we call the Spark grant. That is a more of a 1 year planning grant to spark the concept towards systems change. And then maybe the year after or the year after that, you're in a better position to apply for a larger systems change grant. And we have so many awesome partners. We're now in our 10th year of this grants program. They are increasingly from rural parts of Arizona, which is fantastic. We have two in Santa Cruz County. One is it's called Border Youth Tennis Exchange, and I remember when I first read this initial application, I thought, okay, we're a health foundation. How would we support a tennis organization? But the way that they're doing their work is obviously they're on in the borderlands of Arizona and Mexico. They're working with especially migrant centers where children and increasingly amount of migrant and asylum seekers are finding themselves. obviously have experienced a tremendous amount of trauma from their home countries and then in their journey to America. And the entry point to addressing those traumas is often through physical activity that is facilitated by volunteers and staffers, and in sports like tennis. So, Border Youth Tennis Exchange, or BITE, is training these coaches in trauma informed practices so that when they're interacting with these youth, they can approach their trauma in a different way to kind of address it and make sure that they're getting the support they need through tennis. It's incredible work. I love it. The other one is also based in Nogales and Santa Cruz County, is constructing circles of peace. And there is a great collaborative, a great partner. See, we have shared partnerships. I love this. They have brought together law enforcement, the justice system in the county, the school district, drug prevention organizations, and again, tackling this comprehensive coordinated system of care. Because Nogales is a small community, Santa Cruz County is an under-resourced county, everyone knows everybody in these small towns, and they're doing their best to coordinate these systems of care, but they just needed a little bit more support. So over I think we're in year 2 of the 3-year grant to try to continue to support that coordination so that they can address every aspect in a family's need, especially with victim of domestic violence and again, children and families that have experienced trauma. And then I'll swing up north actually to Flagstaff. We have a phenomenal partnership with the Coconino Coalition for Children and Youth. Again, a coalition of partners from sort of the I-40 corridor in northern Arizona, from the Tri-County area all the way to the Navajo Nation, that is tackling trauma with especially tribal youth, tribal communities, rural communities, and they're working with the city of Flagstaff and Coconino County to try to inform their policies at the city and county level with this trauma lens, to take a whole person approach to improving the health of those communities, especially that have faced trauma. And I participated in one of their conferences a couple years ago. And this is heavy stuff that these partners are dealing with and trying to address. Trauma is a really heavy situation, and there's science that shows that trauma becomes intertwined in your DNA. So there's intergenerational trauma that exists. But one of the speakers at the Coconino Coalition for Children and Youth conference said that we know that there's intergenerational trauma that exists, but that also means that there's intergenerational solutions. And the coalition has brought together young people, tribal elders. It is an incredible journey that they've been on, and I think going to make a really big impact for the people in northern Arizona. So that's just a little taste of a couple of our partners. I feel like I have the best job because I get to work with people like Paula and people like from Santa Cruz County, from Coconino County, that are doing just awesome work.
I feel the same way. And Circles of Peace was one of our first grant recipients, and they outgrew us because
Beautiful.
it was wonderful. That's
How
what
does
we
that
like to
feel for
see.
you? You must feel like a mama bird letting the little birds
Yes,
fly out
I
of the
feel
nest.
so good about that. I do want to share something else with your listeners. We never know where support is going to come from. And I think more and more companies are realizing how important it is to them, not only from a business perspective, but also for their employees to get involved in the nonprofit community, whether they're volunteering or they're donating. And as you can tell, small donations add up. I believe that it takes a village, no matter what. So to that point, people are now putting on Facebook, it's my birthday, please give to this charity, that charity. Invariably, they're large charities. So that's where I came in. Let's focus on the smaller charities where your money really makes a huge impact. So to that, I just want to share this with you. About 15 years ago, I received a phone call, and this fellow gentleman said, I just heard about the Arizona Women's Partnership. Tell me about it. So I gave him the elevator speech, right? He said, okay, I'll send you a check, thinking I was going to usually get $100. And I get $10,000.
Wow.
And he does it again. Of course, I sent him a thank you letter, but I called him and I said, look, I don't know you. Let's have a cup of coffee and sit down. And I want to discuss more about what you're doing. Turned out that his maternal grandmother had left money, and she wanted the three grandchildren who were in three different states to give the money to charities that helped women and children. So bingo, we were there. So after coffee, I said to him, well, our grant review committee is meeting. I usually feed them lunch so they all show up.
Yeah.
Usually we have 10 or 12
Great
people.
tactic.
Yeah, very good tactic. And so we eat first and then we decide, and then we have coffee and dessert. So he came and he pulled me aside. This is after the second year, okay? Going on to the third year. He said, what if I give you more money? I said, well, gee, I felt almost guilty at that point. And I said, well, why don't you select from, usually we have 15 charities that we give to. This year we got a little carried away with 20 some odd. And he said, no, you're so conscientious. I feel so comfortable with your process because we've made it really, I think, easy. And obviously, my husband's a retired CPA, so he first looks at the finances and then he sends it over to me. Go for it. And
It
so
takes a village.
it takes a village, right? And so he just kept doing it for 15 years. It was more than the 10,000. It came up to about 300,000
Yeah, that's
at the end
incredible.
of that. It was one of those things. And then one of the couples who were at the grant review committee, second marriage for both of them, they said, we're going to get married, blah, blah, blah. We don't need anything. What if we tell all of our guests to give money to the Arizona Women's Partnership? I said, are you sure you want to do that? They pulled me aside. I do photography work. And so I was having a show downtown and they pulled me aside and I was like so stunned. They said, we have to talk to you. Oh,
Yeah.
I like to hear that, right?
Yeah, there's so much negativity happening in the world. Wars. Obviously, we have been experiencing a lot with the pandemic, but one of the things that I love in my role at Vitalyst and getting to work with people like Paula and the very generous donors that she has with the partnership is there are so many generous people.
Yes.
Arizona is gets a bad rap for a lot of different reasons. Black guys with late night comedians, making jokes about the state. But there are so many generous people that are doing incredible work, both on the donor side and on the nonprofit partnership
Yeah.
side.
You're so right, David.
That's one of the things that I love so much about the work that we do here
Yes.
is that it's around education.
Mhm.
It's around sharing the stories of, as you both have been doing, and making sure people are aware of all the opportunities that we have to give and to support.
Yeah.
As kind of a silly example, but a powerful example, I went to high school here in Tempe, and we just celebrated our 40th class reunion, and we connected with our school, McClintock High School, which is now a Title I school. And we made sure that we had a couple of the kids come and help with registration both nights, that sort of thing. We had memorabilia. And the VP of students came and spoke about how much the school had changed since 40 years ago and how important legacy is, right? Well, I shared that story because at the end of the night, one of our classmates came up to the VP and said, I want to help contribute, and wrote a check, a substantial check for $50,000, and said, much like this gentleman said to you, when you're ready for more and there's a greater need, please connect with me.
Wow.
So I share that. Obviously, you two know that. Maybe some of our viewers and listeners who are representing some of these smaller organizations. And oftentimes, when we are involved in a charitable organization where we're looking to help out, we don't know how to ask. And the ask is everything, isn't
Right.
it?
Mhm.
We must be able to educate, get the word out, and really just put ourselves in positions like today doing this interview, and even the great work that you both have been doing, help support people to get the help that they need. So love that you've been sharing these stories.
And I think David will agree with me that for us to get the word out, the media has been especially generous.
Good.
No, seriously, over these years, because I've been doing this for 21 years now. As I said, I was going to stop, but I couldn't, But I must say that when I was doing the pastry chef and the other wine, women, and jazz event, I made sure that all the chefs got on TV, even if there were three cooking one thing. One was pouring something, one was mixing something. I just wanted them to have the exposure. And I would say that the TV stations and the radio and obviously this podcast is extremely helpful to us because we can't afford. We're all volunteers. Nobody gets paid in the Arizona Women's Partnership, and we are so dependent and so grateful to the media for helping us out to get the word out. And now with social media, of course, we're all everywhere. So
Have you
Yeah,
found
thank
that
you.
too, David, that that media is supportive of you and the organizations that you help?
yeah. Paula and I were talking before the show that we live in the biggest or the smallest big city
Yes.
in America. And I know a lot of cities say that. I feel like everyone knows everyone in some way. I'm surprised I haven't met Kevin Bacon, actually, 6 degrees of separation here. But there aren't very many native Arizonans or Arizonans. I still don't believe you graduated 40 years ago, Karen.
True.
But a lot of people that are maybe watch the news and see the doom and gloom of the world and feel down. Just do the simple act of one, get to know your neighbor,
Yes.
because you never know what good can come of that. We have a great partnership with the Center for the Future of Arizona that sets the Arizona We Want agenda, and they do polling through the Gallup organization of Arizonans. And a while back, their data had showed just 12% of Arizonans knew who their neighbor was.
Oh,
And I
Oh,
thought,
yeah.
well, if we want to work on improving our democracy and improving our state, do that simple task of getting to know
yeah.
your neighbor and one up, get to know your local charity, your school, your local elementary school, or your church down the street that you might go to, and find great opportunities to volunteer or to give charitably. And it doesn't have to be a lot of money. I was just at the Association of Fundraising Professionals luncheon, and these are all fundraisers for nonprofits throughout the state. And they honored some very generous people. There was one that was being honored and recognized, a volunteer with Honor Health, and her children, when they were born, had to go to the NICU, and they got better thanks to the great nurses and staff at Honor Health. And to give back, she simply started to host a tea
Mm.
with all of her friends and raised, I think, maybe $10,000 or $20,000 initially. I can't remember. Now it's an annual event that raises a $500,000.
Wow.
Fantastic.
Wow.
Incredible people. There's another group, the Chandler Compadres, a group of men
Yep.
in Chandler that get together, raise money, just like the Arizona Women's Partnership, and gives it to especially at-risk youth in Chandler. So these are just people that are connecting with their
Yeah.
neighbors and making a tremendous impact for their community.
I love that you've shared all those tips and really speaking to our listeners and viewers. I know a lot of people who are in business for themselves or they're working for a
Yeah.
corporation. And they've said to me since COVID, really, like I want to be passionate about something outside of work and my little community, right?
Hmm.
I want to know how to get involved and I don't know how to help or I don't know where to start. And what I hear you saying is just start somewhere. I mean,
Hmm.
just to
Exactly.
keep it locked in your brain and kind of, lamenting around what do I do and don't do and waiting for the right thing to be inspired, go and experience, go volunteer, go help out, ask where you can put in your time and effort. Doesn't have to be financial. And have a sense that you're going to find your niche and know
Hmm.
right where you need to be planted to help an organization or a community grow.
You're so right, Karen. And I want to say that with volunteermatch.org, even if you're just kind of looking, window shopping for something to do, you put in a few key words. For example, if you're interested in the environment, you put that in there. If you're interested only in doing something virtually at home, you put that in there, and you'll be surprised what the opportunities are. It's just as you said, it's just unbelievable, and there's no end to it. Right. And you could look at our list. We have 90 charities listed there. You can find one that, and we have the bios on a number of them. They have their, we have a file there with all their contact information, what their goals are, what their mission statement is. So I'm guessing that it's it's there.
It is there. There
A's.
is plenty of
Oh,
need.
I should say that because I did mention the website. It's very simple, azwp.org, Arizona Women's Partnership. And we also, because as I mentioned before, volunteers come and say, gee, I want to help you, but my forte is videography. So thought about it, and I had this one student take photographs of our grant recipients, and we call it Faces of Hope. And I enlarged them thanks to, a local camera shop that paid for all that. And we took them to all the community colleges, ASU. The idea was to encourage students to volunteer. Think about it, not necessarily for those charities, but to give back to the community. And I think there's a real longing in our society for exactly what you're saying, Karen. People just don't know how to do it, how to make that connection, and to go for it.
Yeah.
And it's so enriching. Gibran is a philosopher that I like, and he has a book called The Prophet. And in it, he has this saying that says, when you give of yourself, you truly give.
Mm.
And it really makes you feel wonderful.
Yeah,
So,
beautiful. I'm curious, since this is Business Radio X, could you speak directly to our business owners and our business leaders? How can they get directly involved with you and, of course, the organizations that you serve? But to that specific audience, what is the best way for them to discover how they can best support what you're doing? David, could you start for us?
Sure. Yeah, there are great corporate philanthropists throughout the city, Phoenix, Metro Phoenix, certainly Arizona. And I think there are a lot of ways that folks can get involved. I think, especially for the larger corporations, they have community affairs offices or corporate philanthropists. We work really closely with an entity that is now called AZ Impact for Good. It is formerly the Alliance of Arizona Nonprofits that merged with the Arizona Grantmakers Forum. That's a great way to start for even small businesses that are looking at ways to build up their corporate philanthropy. Certainly, as a entity, you can contribute. But this is another great way to engage your employees as well, to help people find their place and make them proud to be from their hometown or where they live. Certainly our great state, Arizona. Finding a local nonprofit charity that you can adopt and embrace, especially in the spirit of giving, in the season of giving, that's an easy way to do that. Spend a day, allow your employees to take a kind of volunteer day off and go to the food bank and help pack emergency food boxes, which we know is still a critical issue here going into the holidays where people don't have a turkey or stuffing to put on their table, and set up employee match programs. So both volunteer matching, but if your business has an opportunity to match contributions from your employees, that's another great, easy way to show that you care about the community where your employees are from, that you care about our state. And if you need any assistance from this, definitely connect with this great organization, AZ Impact for Good, which can connect you with those corporate philanthropy opportunities.
So even the smaller business owner, right, that may only have 5 or 6 employees, why not encourage them then to also include their stakeholders, their vendors, their customers, that sort of thing, and find a charitable organization that they can wrap their arms around? It's interesting. A dear friend of mine, Lisa Herg, owns RFP Success. A lot of her teammates are outside of the state, but once a year they come together. And I saw pictures of their team the other day doing an Adopt a Highway cleanup, right? So there is, as you both have pointed out, there is the need. Find what really speaks to your heart. What experiences have you had in your life that have you a champion for different aspects of our community that's in need? And go find that connection. Speak, if you would please, Paula, to, again, how business leaders, women perhaps in particular, can get involved with your organization and best support what you're doing.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity again, Karen. I think in terms of the entrepreneurs that are focused on small businesses, maybe there's only 2 or 3 of them. And I think that, what David is saying is very true. You develop this core of support, whether it's, in his case, large corporations, but in our case, it's the smaller non businesses. And women constitute, I think, 75% of the new businesses that are being established here in the state of Arizona. It's amazing. I had the opportunity to go to a restaurant that I had seen focused on PBS, and it's female owned. And the place was packed. And I was so happy to see that. It was in North Scottsdale. I don't want to give advertising to one person and not somebody else. But I think the other way is that, unfortunately, during the course of our lives, people pass on. My friend, a close friend of mine, passed away, and her husband gave donation in her name. And so we have a number of those listed on our website. The point being that most of the time that money goes to large charities. That's what people think of. Not to take anything away from them, But the fact is that there's so much need at the other end. And for smaller entrepreneurial businesses, maybe that's the way to go. Rather than to get lost in the shuffle where your logo will appear on their website. I mean, our grants aren't that large, in the final analysis, and our logos on just about every one of our grant recipient websites, and
Mhm.
so that's good social promotion. When you say conscious capitalism, I think that's where it's at.
That's what it is. All
Yeah.
stakers win,
Thank you.
reciprocating each other,
Yeah.
supporting each other. I love that you pointed that out with the small business leaders. They can relate, likely, to the grassroots efforts and the
Yeah.
volunteerism that's required to have some of these smaller nonprofits succeed so that some of them can graduate and have this massive impact that you spoke to as some of the folks have come through your grant
Yeah.
program.
No doubt.
I love that.
Yeah.
So as we kind of wind up our
Oh,
conversation, if you can
ooh, the
believe, I
hour
know
went.
that we're almost finished with our conversation today. But as Paula said when we were in the green room, both of you each could have a full hour to yourself, and I have no doubt. I love that. I would love to hear from you personally as well as professionally. Why this work for you? Like, does it go back to an event in your life, or even just the way you were raised, or somebody who influenced you? David, would you mind starting for us? Why this work? Why is this who you are in the industry today?
A person that inspires me still, is my mom, who passed away earlier this year. And I always tell the story of her because it gets to the point we were just making with, you can have the least and do the most. My mom was a homemaker, a housewife, stay at home mom of 6 kids in rural southern Arizona, in a town called Marana, just outside of Tucson. And our neighborhood was a very poor neighborhood. There weren't a lot of resources, including childcare. And we know childcare is a huge issue today. Even when you can find childcare, it is so unaffordable. And we're trying to tackle that collaboratively with a lot of different partners. But when I was growing up with my 5 siblings, my mom saw this need for childcare. So even though she still had to raise us 6 kids, opened up the doors to our home and became the neighborhood babysitter. And we didn't have much, but she saw that community need, met the community need, and helped raise the kids in our neighborhood. And when she passed away earlier this year, I was down in my hometown with my family, and we took my dad out to lunch. The table next to us was somebody that I thought I'd recognize, and she was a staff member at our elementary school, and she had heard that my mom had passed and got up and said, "Are you the Martinez kids?"
Mm.
Because she remembered us all from elementary school, and she had the nicest things to say about my mom. And she remembered that thought she was crazy, first of all, for raising 6 kids and then becoming the neighborhood babysitter. But she just said the nicest things about my mom, and how she really, and everyone at the school really appreciated that she stepped up and met that community need. There are heroes like that, like my mom, throughout the state. And again, doing the most with the least. And I think Paula and I are in such great privileged positions to leverage resources to try to support those heroes. And that really is what inspires my work at Vitalyst Health Foundation. I get to work with a great team of folks at Vitalyst Health Foundation and the Technical Assistance Partnership of Arizona, or TAP-AZ. Great peer colleagues in the funder network as well. I know, again, there's a lot of doom and gloom in the world, there's a lot of negativity, but again, there's so many passionate, inspiring heroes in the state. So get to know your neighbor, find your favorite local nonprofit, and do what you can, just like my mom did.
Mm.
I thank you, David, and your mom. I'm sorry to have never met her. Sounds like a wonderful
Mhm.
woman. I'm the daughter of immigrants, and so my parents really didn't want to talk about their childhood because it was so traumatic. My father was a newsie on Second Avenue and Second Street in New York City when he was like 10 years old, and then when he was 16, he got a job with the New York Times, sweeping the floors, and then he joined the union, and so he stayed there for 42 years.
Wow.
He brought home the New York Times every day. He came home because he worked nights, came home about 8 o'clock as we were leaving for school, and we had to read it. I mean, that was, he said, the key to success in our society is through education.
Love
And my
that.
mother felt the same way. She was a self-taught seamstress, working in the sweatshops in New York City. But at that time, New York City was a fashion center. And so she got to work for the top designers because she was really conscientious and good. And her dresses would appear in Saks window or Bonwit Teller. But they always told us that never take for granted what you have. Now they're telling us this, and there's 6 of us in a 1-bedroom apartment with my grandfather. And my father turns a closet into his photo studio. He develops the photographs there because photography was his hobby. They saved enough money to buy a house, but they always said, always look back and help the next person. Don't take anything for granted. And so that was my upbringing. And I thought when we came here, coming from New York City, you can make a lot happen here. And I think David sees that. This is a big, small town. Once you get connected, you know how to get the ducks in a row and you have them quacking your song. No, seriously. I was president of women in management for a corporation here, a large corporation. And I thought, why don't I do something for the women of Arizona? This was back in the day. And so I came up with this idea and I contacted women who also had management positions within the corporation. I said, if I can pull this off, would you support me? You in Flagstaff, you in Payson, you in Prescott, you in Yuma, you in Tucson. They all said yes. So with that idea, I took it to women who had executive positions with women's organizations. And I said, I got this idea, blah, blah, blah. Would you support me? Yes, we would. So I approached the governor and I said, look, I have this idea. I'd like the year proclaimed for Arizona women. And he said, okay, sounds like a good idea. I will appoint 2 of my special assistants to help you. Okay, I'm not kidding. So I'm doing this in conjunction with my job, so I don't sleep anymore, right? I'm drinking a lot of coffee. But I saw that you can make things happen. If you have a vision and you're willing to do the work and you really don't need the credit for it, that's another important issue. Let other people take credit for it and sometimes position it so they think it was their idea. It gets done. I was only going to have 5 events that year. I wound up with 100. Had to take a leave of absence from my job, convinced the Arizona Republic to do a special supplement, was contacted by the President's Council on Health and Fitness to do a fitness session down at the conference center. It just kind of went on and on. So a couple of years ago, I decided that I was going to do a women's art show. I was going to curate it. And I pulled together a jury of a diverse jury, Black, Hispanic, Native American, Asian American, and Anglo women. And we did it. We had In Celebration of Women. And unfortunately, COVID closed the show down. It was at the Herberger. And then we took it 2 years later at the Arizona State Capitol. The Arizona Women's Partnership was the featured nonprofit. That was part of the deal. I'm doing all this work for free. The Arizona Women's Partnership will be part of this. And I was contacted again this year. So the show is now, it's a different show. We have now 38 women artists. It's at the Arizona State Capitol Museum until December 16th.
Wow.
Wow.
The 2 of you.
So inspiring.
Both of you.
I'm so glad to know you, Paula.
My pleasure. My pleasure to know both of you.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
The
Incredible.
great thing about the timing of our conversation today, and again, I'm deeply appreciative of Elena Thornton for the
Yes.
introduction, is that Giving Tuesday is coming up in 5 days. Am I right? Wait, today's
In a week.
Yeah, in a week. Yes, I don't even know what day it is.
What is time?
Right. Anyway, soon, in a week, Giving Tuesday. So it's a great opportunity again to put yourself out there, start connecting with the charitable causes that are interest to you. And if you're not sure which one you want to run with long term, go play around and give where you can and offer your support. Let's finish up our segment today by each of you, again, just letting us know the name of your organization, where we can find you on the World Wide Web, and then what social media outlets make sense for us to follow you as well.
Yeah, I'm glad to work at Vitalyst Health Foundation. You can find us at vitalysthealth.org. And we're on most of the socials, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram. So happy to engage with the business sector and with inspired Arizonans. So don't hesitate to reach out.
And David, are you yourself on LinkedIn?
I am on LinkedIn
And is
as well.
Vitalyst on, they have a page on LinkedIn as well?
Yes.
Very important for our business leaders. And we are broadcasting live video on LinkedIn. So David Martinez, and does it say the third on there
The
as well?
third.
Very good. I love it. Thank you again for spending your precious time with us
Thanks,
today.
Karen.
Paula, close us out, please.
Okay, Paula Cullison, and it's the Arizona Women's Partnership, azwp.org. We're on all the social media outlets, and I'm also on all the social media outlets, whether it's Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Well, it's no longer Twitter, but anyhow, they're LinkedIn. And we are putting together, as a matter of fact, I just sent it out this morning, a video of the reception at the Arizona Capitol Museum. It'll be on our website, but the other videos are there. There's a lot of information on our website, azwp.org.
So good.
Thank you.
Goodness. Oh my goodness. Such a pleasure. So you've been listening to Phoenix Business Radio, broadcasting live from the Max 6 Entrepreneurial Center. Some media leans left, some lean right, and we lean community advocacy through partnerships and nonprofits. Until next time, Karen Nowicki, thanks for listening.